UConn's season opener went as expected. Plus, later we'll have a report on Agot Makeer and other international recruits UConn is targeting. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I want to take a moment to share some news. October was huge for us at Locked On UConn, thanks to amazing guests like Emily Adams, insightful co-hosts like Dan Meehan, and the Football Friday guys. Your support has been amazing. And a special shout out to our everydayers for being a part of this fast-growing community. As we grow, we're proud to give back even more. We donate 10% of our revenue to Bleeding Blue for Good and another 10% to Husky Ticket Project. So every follow, download, subscription helps support UConn athletes and sends kids to experience the thrill of UConn games, both football and basketball. Foot stays on gas in November, though, right? With that said, if you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe and follow wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. Together, we're building something special and helping make a real difference for Husky fans everywhere. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. UConn season opener against Boston University, the Terriers. UConn kicked off their season in style, overwhelming BU with an 86-32 win at the XL Center. Leading the charge were freshman Sarah Strong and redshirt freshman Jana El Alfy, each putting up impressive numbers with 17 points. It was an exciting debut for both players. Really, I didn't expect to feel like I was watching kind of like a changing of the guard because, again, it's so early. And Paige didn't need to be Paige yet, even though she was fantastic too. But Geno Auriemma put it, this game was about both showcasing the team's strengths and learning where there's still room to grow. So I thought that was a really great reflection on what this looks like, and take it from a guy who's been around for 40 years and knows what it looks like to understand that perspective. And I thought that was incredibly balanced. Geno reflected on the balance between their strong first half and the challenges they faced in the second half. He said, quote, that first half, we played a half like we had hoped we would play. And then we wanted to work on some things in the second half. And it showed up that we have a lot of work to do, which is good. This is what we're really good at. And this is what we need a lot of work on. So for Geno, games like this are super valuable because they highlight both the positives and the areas that need refinement. One of the biggest bright spots of the game was Sarah Strong. We did an entire segment on her when we were talking about the team preview. We feel like she is the makings of being the next star at UConn. She's the number one ranked freshman in the 2024 class for a reason. She was making her first collegiate start, and she filled up the stat sheet with 6 steals, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, shooting efficiently, 8 of 12 from the field. Strong showed a bit of humility, though, noting, I feel like I did start off slow and got better as the game went on. I just want to build on keeping aggressive and being more confident in the paint. It's clear that while she's already playing at a high level, she's hungry to keep improving. Goes back to her comments about walking into the gym and seeing the faces of legends on the wall and saying, I want to be up there someday. So keep pushing, keep going forward, Sarah. You're doing a phenomenal job. I mean, think about her stats. She was 8 of 12 from the field. She didn't miss a 2. She missed no 2-pointers in this game because she was 1 of 4 from 3. So she was 7 of 7 from inside the 3-point arc. She's the real deal. Jana El Alfy making her long-awaited debut after missing last season due to injury. Impressed with a double-double in just 18 minutes. She notched 11 rebounds alongside her 17 points, showcasing her rebounding instincts and skill inside the paint. Having her on the court brings a new level of depth and talent to UConn's front court, and her presence was felt immediately. I said it on the live reaction show last night and prior to this that as long as Jana takes her time, she's going to be a force. And last night it looked like the game slowed down for her a little bit, really kind of allowed her to gather herself. She didn't put the ball in harm's way like she did in the exhibition, which was just a good sign. And I think that's going to give her something to build to move forward. Obviously, Paige Bueckers also delivered, scoring 13 points, adding 7 assists, 4 rebounds, and 5 steals. Always stuffing the stat sheet, no matter how much time she plays on the court. Her experience and leadership is going to be crucial this season, but I love that this young roster that includes talented freshmen or talented sophomores now, like Ashlyn Shade, added 10 points and a career-high 6 steals. This defensive effort helped UConn make 25 steals against BU. I think they had like 36 turnovers, something crazy like that. But what I was about to say about Paige before I lost my train of thought was, what I love about this is now Paige has a supporting cast. So there's no more like, oh, it's, again, oh God, I don't even want to put this out there. Unless Paige gets hurt, which she probably won't, knock on wood, wherever you're listening to this. This is going to be a season where there's no more what ifs, right? Even if AZ doesn't come back 100%, if she comes back even 80% of what she was, this team has the weapons to compete for a national championship. If Paige is Paige, she has a supporting cast that is, that is partnered or compared to some of the other greats supporting casts in recent years. So it is imperative for her to look at this game by game, minute by minute, enjoy this, because this is the last run for her. And I thought last night was great. I think you could actually see the joy of her playing because she doesn't feel like she has to do everything. And I think that's really important. Just because Geno wants her to be more aggressive doesn't mean that he wants her to be stupidly aggressive. She knows what she's doing. She's fantastic at it. The Husky defense held Boston University to just 25% shooting in the first half and limited the Terriers to only 13 points, which I thought was phenomenal. Geno commented on the team's surprising shooting efficiency. He said, I was surprised we shot as well as we did that first half. Some of the stuff that they're going to have to do is going to take some time, but that's half your team that's never played. And he's right. He emphasized the adjustment period these new players will face as they get more games under their belt. In addition to Strong and El Alfy, the game marked the debut for freshman Morgan Shelley and Ellie Zabal, along with graduate transfer Caitlin Chen. UConn having depth is a luxury, as Bob Joyce said. 10 players available, contributing a total of 38 points off the bench. When was the last time they did that? It's increased, exponentially the type of assets now they have as the season progresses, and especially after last season's injury-limited roster. So as they prepare to host South Florida on Sunday, UConn's first outing showcase both their potential and their areas that need polish, which is a coach's dream, a win, plus we get to work on some stuff. It's an exciting start, and if this game was any indication, the Huskies are in for an incredible season. We're going to talk about Agot Makeer, Lara Somfai, and Olivia Vukosa for the rest of this show, because before this season ends, hopefully we'll get a commit or 2 or 3 from these folks. Olivia probably not, because she's 26, but either Agot or Lara, if they commit to UConn, not only is this season going to be championship or bust, but next season as well. We're going to talk about that with Alfred Corriette of Her Hoop Stats after this. Hiring for your small business? Look no further than LinkedIn Jobs. Find quality professionals who are a perfect fit for your team, fast and for free. With 86% of small businesses finding a qualified candidate within 24 hours, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to connect with top professionals you won't find on any other job sites. And it's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you search candidates who may not be actively searching but are open to the right opportunity. Post your job for free and discover just how easy LinkedIn makes hiring. Head to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to get started. And you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto. As promised, we're about to bring in Alfred Corriette. He is a journalist who covers the Liberty and the W, as well as a contributor to Her Hoop Stats. And one of the reasons why we keep bringing him back is UConn is scouting a bunch of international players, and that's his expertise. So without further ado, let's get him on the program and get his perspective. Alfred, how are you, man? How's it going?
Good. Thanks for bringing me back on.
Oh, man, anytime. Really appreciate it, especially when we're talking about Agot Makeer. Her versatility is kind of akin to what we're seeing, but in a different way from Sarah Strong with UConn. She debuted last night with 17 points, had was as efficient as you could possibly be. She was 1 of 4 from 3, but she was 8 of 12 from the field. So she didn't miss a 2-point shot in her debut in college. Really, I think surprising people with how she has court vision for her front court mates and the ability to kind of move the ball. That's something with Agot, versatility in her offensive game. How can her skill set, if she does come to UConn, help with UConn's offensive schemes and pairing with someone like Sarah, who is going to be a staple in UConn's offense for years to come?
Yeah, so I think when you're bringing in someone like Agot, you're thinking of bringing an additional scoring weapon. And if you're a team like UConn, you can really thrive on having multiple offensive weapons on the floor. You're looking at someone that can drive, that can get into the lane, that can shoot, that can do multiple things on the floor. And then when you're thinking of pairing that with a Sarah Strong, if Agot comes over, and then also having a Blanca Quinones in future years, you're talking about a UConn team that's going to have a lot of offensive versatility, especially from those wings. And I think you have to love it, like especially if Agot comes. And I think you're looking at a player that's a top 5 prospect. Many schools want to bring Agot in, and I think if Geno can get the job done, then that's even a bigger ace for UConn.
Before we even get into more of that, have you heard anything about the decision timeline? I know she's cut it to 6 schools, UConn being one of them. I know South Carolina's in the mix, as well as a few other kind of blue bloods on the women's side. Can you kind of elaborate on that at all, or if you've heard anything?
Yeah, so far I haven't heard any updates. I'm always looking to see like what is her in the pipeline, but I think she's still weighing her options right now.
Is there? Do you know? Regardless of whether she chooses us or others, we obviously wish her the best wherever she goes. Is there even a timeline? Because I know on the men's side that I cover, there were guys who I'm going to do the 23rd or October 16th. Is there a date set, or is it still kind of up in the air?
Yeah, I think it's still a bit up in the air from the last things that I've seen. So it's kind of like a wait and see. But I think we should hopefully have an answer at least relatively soon.
All right, fair enough. Back to her play. She's got some incredible instincts on the defensive end. How can her athleticism and defensive versatility impact UConn's lineup if she does decide to come with the Huskies, particularly in matchups against taller and quicker opponents?
Well, I think the one thing with a guy, you're looking at someone who's 6'1" and a lengthy 6'1" at that. And when you're looking at a UConn team that has players like Jana at 6'5", you're looking at Sarah Strong at 6'2", Zabel at 6 feet, and then other lengthy players coming into the UConn fray. I think you're going to be able to have some bigger lineups that can definitely give teams problems because, when you're having that length, especially on the defensive side of things, it really can, clog up spacing at times and really make things harder for offenses. But, with Agot's, athleticism, again, we've talked about, Quinones again, when you're just able to have someone that can just make those high impact defensive plays because of what she can do, disrupting passing lanes, forcing turnovers. A lot of the things that she did, to get into transition, especially on the international side, was things resulting from her defensive abilities. So, being able to be effective on the defensive end and then also create those offensive looks for the team. I think that's what you're looking from Agot.
Yeah, I know this isn't something we talked about pre-show, but if you think about, because you brought up Blanca, if you get Agot and you get Blanca, then you have Jana and Sarah. If you could play all of them at the same time. And even put another guard in either Ali Zabal or Morgan Shelley, who played a little bit last night, is about 6'2". You could literally have a lineup of people from 6'1" to 6'5" at 1 through 5 and essentially play positionless basketball. And I think this isn't a question I was going to ask, but do you think that's Geno's vision, whether he gets Agot or not, is essentially to have a team where he has positional size and athleticism everywhere?
Well, I can't speak for Geno, but I think
any coach, right?
That's any coach. That's the direction where basketball is headed. Having players that you can just slot in at 1 to 5 that is super versatile. You don't really get that defensive disruption because you may have some size mismatches. Like you may have like a small guard here or there that really makes things a bit difficult. To have that length and size at 1 through 5. I think most coaches are looking at it like, how can we really make that our schemes for the future?
For sure. And then we'll transition this into her transition play and her athleticism. You brought up Blanca Quinones, who's also a 6'1", 6'2" wing that UConn is bringing in from South America. So let me ask you a question. If Agot Makeer excels in transition as much as Blanca Quinones does, what would it look like for UConn utilizing her speed and transition to create fast break opportunities. In particular, when you add Blanca into the mix and having them both on the court at the same time, like how do you see that happen? What do you see out of that other than Geno with a smile from ear to ear watching them get out on the break?
Well, I think a lot of UConn fans will have smiles from ear to ear, playing that nice fast-paced basketball in transition, because if you're able to have Blanca and Agot, rim running, getting those quick baskets, and then you pair in like a KK Arnold, who's also a speedster in herself, really making those high, volume plays. I think that's going to be fun because, just having that length, that speed, and really making those quick plays, because, quick, efficient twos are definitely key for a team. I don't think you should really shortchange them because, especially in games where you really need to chip away, those quick twos can really help a team a lot. So being able to do that, but also being able to do that in a fun and efficient way and a smart way also, I think that's the key. You're looking at Agot. If you look at her play in the U17 World Cup, most of her plays were actually transition plays and transition possessions. So if you're looking at someone like Agot that can get downhill, and she also in transition in the World Cup generated roughly 1.5 points per transition plays. So that's like saying you're basically getting a guaranteed 2 or guaranteed scoring with Agot. So if you're able to bring someone like that to UConn, I think the Husky fans have to be, excited.
Absolutely. Last question on Agot before we transition to Laura and eventually Olivia. If you had to compare Agot Makeer to a former or current UConn player or even a WNBA player, who would it be and why?
So this is a question I've actually struggled with because I think like Agot and so many of these international players, they just have bits and pieces from so many players. It's hard to pinpoint and say, okay, this is like the next version of such and such. But, when I look at Agot, I'm looking at, especially like her with like the ball in her hands coming off screens. You can see like the DTs, the Paiges, the great UConn players. You're looking at like what Meyer's done, at UConn, especially. You're looking at the defensive tenacity of players like Gabby and so on. But it's really just, the bits and pieces and seeing it come to really have an eclectic blend and a top quality player.
Fair enough. All right, man. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to talk about some ads really quick and make sure I can keep my job. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about Lara Somfai and then a 2026 recruit that they're really hot on, Olivia Vukosa. Okay, coming up after the break. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up all the financial flavors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privilege of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with Alfred Corriette of Her Hoop Stats and covering the WNBA's Liberty, coming off a title. You got to be happy about that. I think I saw you at the parade having some fun, right?
That was fun, to see New York celebrating its first WNBA championship and first basketball championship in 50 years. To see the streets flooded with seafoam, it was such an amazing experience. And then also the post City Hall celebration at Barclays Center, that was loud. It was like a concert basically, so that was fun.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm glad they deserved it. It really amazing WNBA finals that pitted two UConn stars. So we were definitely locked in. We had Emily Adams talking about it a little bit because she was there covering it. So, but now we're talking about the future, and we just talked about Agot Makeer, and now we're going to talk about Lara Somfai, another one that's an intriguing one. Before we get into her game, physical presence, everything that comes with it. What I've heard is that she is down to UConn and Stanford. Is that what you've heard? That Stanford is essentially kind of the pull of that is that, from what I've heard, is that her father wants her to go to Stanford because they have a better education. What are your thoughts on that? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I've heard kind of like the similar things with Lara. Like especially with UConn and mixed. I mean, I could understand like where the Stanford attraction would be because of, the educational system, also having another Aussie, historically in Atlanta,
Right.
kind of continuing that. But I mean, I think it's ultimately like really weird as she wanted to play at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think the Stanford being in the ACC might have something to do with the hesitation that she hasn't made this is all speculation. I've not heard this, but you have to wonder, with as much travel as involved in ACC basketball now, if that's a consideration to going to UConn. Because I mean, they do do a lot of travel in terms of out of conference, but the Big East is relatively regional still. So that could play into some of it, especially coming from Australia. So, but let's get into her game. She's known for her physical presence, and she's got a good inside game. Somfai brings strong post moves. What impact could her rebounding and post moves have on UConn's front court depth, especially against physical teams in the Big East?
Yeah, so anytime you have a player that has a big frame like Lara Somfai has, and is a quality rebounder and can give you something in the post, it's always big time. And especially if you're your UConn team, you really want to up your front court game, not just from the standpoint of upgrading it from the Big East perspective, but also from a national perspective. You look at a team like, for example, like South Carolina, the national champions right now, and a team that UConn may have to see en route to a national championship. They lost Aaliyah Boston and Camila Cardoso to the W, but they're bringing in players like Joyce Edwards and Adel Tack, and that's just things like that are happening nationally. So for UConn to possibly bring in a Lara Somfai at a big 6'4", to have with Jana at 6'5", we've previously talked about Gandhi on the show, at 6'5" as well, to have that level of depth while other colleges across the country are increasing their front court depth. That's the big thing for UConn.
Yeah, I was about to mention Gandhi in to have kind of a revolving three-way door of these women being able to kind of come in and out, because as we saw from Jana last night, 17 points, 11 rebounds in her debut. She's going to be a presence for this year and years to come. But having that depth, and then I also was going to say, in we kind of ran out of time in that last segment, but if you add Gandhi into the mix, who's a rim runner herself and who is incredibly fast at 6'5", this team isn't just going to be big; it's going to be incredibly quick, and having these dynamics is really fantastic for what UConn's trying to do. Hypothetically, right?
Sure.
No one has committed just yet. All right, man. As far as pick and roll dynamics, Somfai has shown an ability to be effectively kind of reading whether she needs to roll to the basket or when she needs to flare out. How might her pick and roll game pair with UConn's playmakers in the absence of Paige Bueckers, obviously, for next season, and create more scoring opportunities for them?
Well, the one thing with Lara that's good for her is that she can operate as a roller and as a popper. So that now you have those options for UConn, where if you want to put her in settings where she's rolling to the rim and cutting to the rim or slipping and just trying to get open looks, you have that ability for her. Also, just one small thing, just to go back to the transition game, Somfai is also another big that can operate in transition. If you watch like what she did in the U18 Asia Cup this year, some of her plays were her acting as a transition ball handler and getting the ball and, creating plays in transition. So if you can add a Somfai to the mix with Gandhi and with Quinones and possibly with Agot, you're talking about another big that can, do some things and, play a fast-paced UConn style. But back to, screen actions, I think the good thing with Somfai is, just her having a good frame to be able to be a solid screen setter as well. That can really open up things for the UConn guards, but then also just make things happen on the floor.
It's fantastic. Yeah, all of one of the things about these hypotheticals that gets us excited, but I always have to put the caveat in is like none of these people have committed outside of Blanca, outside of Gandhi, but the ones we're talking about are kind of who's out there still, and who has UConn as a big presence waiting for them to make a decision. I'm sure keeping tabs on them. On the defensive side, how can she protect the paint and deter opponents from driving? Even just what's her strength from that perspective? I know she's 6'4". Do you put her in the same class as Jana as a shot blocker? Better, worse? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say she's a decent shot blocker. I wouldn't put her as like one of the top 3 or 4 shot blockers, but she is someone that can do that and can affect the game defensively. That end, if she were to come to UConn, I can see her kind of slotting as maybe a 4 to Jana's 5, someone that can be a help side shot blocker, someone that can, affect the game that way. So I think that's really like what you will see from Lara Somfai. But also because she has a big frame, sometimes when players are driving and you're bumping into that sometimes is just a way of, affecting shots and whatnot, especially if she can remain vertical. So I think, she statistically may not have the shot blocking numbers that leap off, especially on the international side, but she also does things to affect the game that really helps on the defensive side.
Fair enough. Last question on Laura, and then we'll get into a little bit about Olivia in the 26th class. Same question I asked about Agot. Who would you compare her to for UConn fans? Either that's someone that's playing in the WNBA or a former UConn player, a former UConn great.
Sure. So with this one, I would say Lara kind of reminds me of like a little bit of a smaller Steph Dolson in some aspects, but also like a bigger Fee in some aspects.
Okay.
In the sense of that, like she can actually do things in the post, but also create on the perimeter. If you like look at what she's able to do. So I think at 6'4" to be able to do that, because not a lot of 6'4" players, has that big frame, but can also handle the ball and do things on the perimeter. So I think when you're looking at that, and then also what she does in the post, and also being able to spot up and shoot threes, I think you have a little bit of that stuff Dolson Fee mold in there somewhere.
All right, I like it. I'm sure the fans would love that. All right, Olivia Vukosa is the 2026. I wouldn't call her. I mean, I think for UConn, she's the jewel of that 26 class because they're really trying to. They're after her big time. What are your thoughts on her initially, even before we get into specifics about rebounding, about her offensive range, that kind of stuff? Like, just give us a quick overview of what you see from Olivia.
Oh, I love Olivia's game and what she can be. I think she's going to be one of the highly touted bigs in her class, and a lot of schools are going to want to try to get her, especially UConn. And I think if you can get someone, especially going to Christ the King in New York, somewhere not too far from UConn, I know a lot of New York fans would definitely love to see her go somewhere relatively close, and especially for a quality program like UConn. But Olivia Vukosa just does so many things well on the floor, and especially at that young age. And what you're seeing is a player that, can help any college regardless of like where she goes.
For sure. She's been described as 6'4", the moves a forward, but with the moves of a guard. So I think there's definitely some, again, positional versatility there as well. She's known for her rebounding and energy on the court. How important could her play and rebounding tenacity be in games where UConn faces teams with strong front court players? If she comes to UConn, what does she bring in that aspect from her rebounding and her energy?
Oh, Vukosa is an elite rebounder. I mean, you're looking at rebounding just in general. You're talking about securing possessions for your team, but also limiting the possessions of the other team. And that's going to be key, especially if UConn finds themselves in dogfights against other quality front court players. You're looking at Olivia Vukosa, Big O, as she goes by, Big O. U17 World Cup for Croatia, she averaged over 15 rebounds per game. She had, multiple 20-plus rebounding games as well. So you're looking at a player who can be a quality rebounder, especially if you're able to, have that impact on the international level. Just think of like what you can do coming over here, especially for this UConn program. But just an elite rebounder, and I think would be a big plus for UConn if she decides to come here. And, we talked about the Liberty. I mean, look at Game 5 in the championship. New York out-rebounded Minnesota 44-33. And you can argue those extra rebounds definitely helped New York in their comeback push in Game 5. You're looking at a player like Lara Somfai, kind of in the mold of a Vukosa, big body, can do things. And to have her come in and make plays, that's the type of player you need.
Extra rebounds, extra possessions, and extra possessions lead to extra points. I get it, man. It's a great point. We know she's young. She's not even in this class. She's in the 2026 class. How do you see her developing from an offensive perspective? Because everyone's trying to be an all-around player. You don't want to just be pigeonholed into one specific aspect of playing. So how do you see her shooting range evolving into a scoring threat as she comes into a potential college basketball season at UConn or otherwise?
Yeah, so we've already seen that she can step out and occasionally hit the three, which I think is a good sign for her at her age, class level. And, I think as she continues to develop offensively, I think that's what's going to be the exciting part is you're seeing a player that is already highly touted and is already making an impact right now. What does that extra year of development before she goes to whatever collegiate program, what does that look like per se? But offensively, I think, she has the post move. She has the ability to do things there. But if she can continue to develop that shooting touch and develop that shooting range and step out, that's going to be big for her.
All right. Last question. You already know the question. Who does she compare to? I know it's young. She could, or early. She's young. She could project into something different. But actually, it's a better question. Who does she project as eventually in her career? Where do you see her projecting as a former UConn great or a WNBA player?
So I know I previously, mentioned that Lara Somfai is having kind of like that Steph Dolson category, but to me, Vukosa most definitely fits that Steph Dolson mold more, rather than that kind of like Dolson fee-ish, like Vukosa has that big body. She really reminds me of that Dolson mold, but also just like some of the quality bigs that we've seen that have like a big frame and can do things. I think Vukosa, has the potentials to be great. She's looked at as one of the top players in her class already. So I think, as she continues to develop, she can be one of the all-time UConn greats if she ever decides to come to the Husky program.
All right, man. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on the show as always. Like I said, open door to come and talk UConn hoops. That's today's episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. Thank you to Alfred Corriette. We're asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day, and it's been the goal for the Huskies under Geno and Chris Daly for 40 years. That's all, folks. Go Huskies.